Hey everybody, it's Christine Parakis and welcome back to the Career Invincibility Radio Show. I have been waiting for this guest to get on with us because he is so much fun, good friend of mine, but also an incredible expert at the forefront of advancing ideals of the digital world. He inspires opportunity-oriented individuals and companies to harness the power of online media, elevating their profiles, engaging their communities, and winning new business. He's been doing this for so long, one of the first independent LinkedIn consultants, and he's sought after by Fox, WGN TV, CBS, WGN Radio, and has contributed to the HuffPost, and NBC, and Forbes. He's also a student of improvisational and sketch comedy at the Second City in Chicago, which is one of my favorite places for comedy. So with no further ado, welcome J.D. GERSHBEIN. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Not as happy as I am, Christine. In fact, you might say I'm feeling rather invincible. On the other
I'm so glad. You just came out of the womb that way, right? You've never had any zigs and zags to get here to you.
I turned my head to the right, I turned my head to the left, and I said, where's the action at?
Right. Well, I know if you'll indulge us a bit, I love to hear how successful people like you have gone on their journeys and what they've had to overcome to get there.
You know, I never really spoke of what I did as a journey, Christine. The journey speak didn't make much sense to me because when I started out in business, which was quite a while ago, you could do the math if I gave you the age on that and gave you a few years. But my goal was to just do high-quality work. And if I did the best I could, I felt things would take care of themselves. And throughout my academic training, I learned a few things about the English language, about industrial organizational psychology, about marketing communications, and about neuroscience. And I was well equipped to handle any kind of corporate career that I set my mind to, but that did not pan out. And at the time that I was trying to stick my resume through the crack, there were hiring freezes, there were recessions and economic downturns, and I was really kind of forced out of any kind of life in the corporate world, and that was okay because I was an entrepreneur at heart. And I can honestly say, in retrospect, I probably couldn't have worked well for anybody else. I really enjoy the thrill and the idea of being who I am as an independent, and I take my individualism very seriously, and I bet on myself to win. And when I met LinkedIn, it was love at first sight. It was something that I felt was tailor-made for me, and the way that I was hardwired, I just glommed on. And I took it to a level that I felt I should be at with it, and if I was there with it, then why couldn't I show others how to get there? And I basically answered a call of leadership and never looked back.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. I refer to that as being drop-kicked as well. I was in a career path very different than the one that I was destined for, and it took a drop kick. Why do you think, as a business psychologist, that we who are truly entrepreneurial have to be drop-kicked into our destiny?
Because that's our genetic build. I really think that there's almost a different sensory input between entrepreneurs and high-impact corporate contributors. And we have equal parts focus and equal parts determination and discipline. But in our case, and I'll use us as a collective, I think we just see ourselves differently in the business universe. We see ourselves as those leaders, as those visionaries, as those innovators. And we truly make the effort to elevate our profiles and stand out. I'm a shy guy by nature. I was probably more of an introvert on the schoolyard playground, but I really kind of found it in the insular world of the internet and came alive and really put myself out there in a way where I was competitive and that I could be taken at face value, and that's how I wanted the world to view me. So I think that if I can speak for you just for the purposes of this question, yes, we're classical entrepreneurs in the sense that we take risks, But at the same time, we're cautiously optimistic. We play to our strengths. We understand our limitations, and we just put ourselves in position to win.
Well, amen for that. And sometimes we have to look around and say, oh, yes, I'm in a position to win, right, when it doesn't necessarily feel that way. And, that's what I'm really speaking to is, we don't always know that we're on the right track. And you found yourself in that position and running with it, right? And it's being able to do that, I think, that makes for the opportunities that you've created, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and I also think it depends on the level of feedback that we've received, especially during the formative years as our intellect is taking place and we're developing our emotions. The feedback I got while I was a graduate school student was, mostly academic and professorial, and I was on the right track and doing my work and defending a master's thesis in industrial psychology on humor and advertising. I felt that this was going to propel me into the world of advertising, and I was going to have a great career in the creative arts. And that didn't happen. So what do? I pivot. It's been a lifetime of pivoting for me, and truly an exercise in improvisation, applied improvisation. So I'm kind of like the creator of my own temperament, and in the words of the late great comic Bill Hicks, I am the creator of my own facilitative. I'm the facilitator of my own creative evolution. I really have seen what's out there on the landscape. I've tried to master my environment in the best way possible, and I've just tried to move towards some idealized, if not romanticized, notion of who I am in business, and it stuck. It worked, and fortunately, for me, in 2006, when I saw LinkedIn, I knew I had a career right away. I just felt that was it for me, so the journey became suddenly very linear.
So you picked up something that very few at the time knew was going to be so critical. And now tell us about that in terms of how important it is and what's changed between pre-COVID and current times about LinkedIn.
Well, great question. We are taping this about 8.5 months into the pandemic, and my gosh, who would have expected this, Christine, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, really, who would have expected this? Yet, on the other hand, we were due for something like this, and I think it's been a real case study in human adaptation and how we're innovating around what we're doing, and again, that other I word, improvisation. And everything I've ever done has been an audition to get me to where I am right now. And I've improvised successfully. I've extended things that I had no business extending, and I've left the stage when it was time to call the scene. So I kind of have this sense of performance art and timing to do what I do. And when the pandemic took hold and we were forced to shelter at home, I was already in the virtual world. I've been working very comfortably at home virtually since the day I sent my first email. And it's never been that kind of stretch for me, but I know that it was for a lot of people. And one of the things that has truly changed since the onset of the pandemic is that we are leaning into this virtual life now with greater reliance and dependence. And many people do not have the skill sets that have enabled them to really sustain themselves as the pandemic has marched on. And that's where the opportunity has been for someone like myself. I'm well schooled in the digital lifestyle. I can communicate it effectively to people, but I can also meet them at their point of pain. And I understand there's a lot of pain and difficulty and anxiety and stress and tension. And I approach folks from the place of being a healer, and I try to comfort them. I try to alleviate the pain. It's not that hard. Truly, it is not. And that's been my focus, is a very consultative, healing-based viewpoint that ideally moves the needle for people and enables them to thrive.
That's beautiful. And I certainly know that that's your character in terms of my own experiences with you. And how do we What is the state of our personal branding? Everybody talks about branding, but how do we self-assess and get introspective and craft a story that is, appealing or enticing online now with all the noise that we have?
How do we do it? Well, that's an individual take, Christine. It's everybody's work. And there's nobody who can write the definitive field guide on that right now. It's a question of how we feel we measure up against this vast virtual landscape right now. Personal branding is a uniquely neural concept that engages the most active intellectual and emotional centers of the brain. The limbic lobe, the human limbic system, which really enables us to remember people. And the goal is that personal branding, which does involve the laying down of memory and associations and identity and markers that we use to kind of fixate ourselves in the minds of others. That's an ongoing pursuit. Nobody wakes up one day and says, "Hey, I'm going to build a brand." It's got to be a systematic, methodical, sequential phenomenon that really has taken place since childhood. And in my book, I'm exploring the ways that we incorporate what the great French psychologist Jean Piaget called our schema, and we make judgments about what to incorporate in our lives and what to discard. And things that have stuck with us from childhood, and in my own life included, have become a part of how we build our brand. A lot of it has been laid out for us. We just have to kind of incorporate the best of the best and externalize it in a way that makes sense to others so that they can remember us, so that they can place us, so that they can retrieve us when the conversation turns to the areas with which we'd like to be associated.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's all very possible and doable, but really, are we able to do this on our own? And if so, how? And if not, how would you help us?
Well, self-assessment is obviously deep work, and there's not a whole lot of folks who can get into our brains besides us. Try as we may, we can never get into the mind of another human being. But we have developed accountability partnerships with people. We've been able to crowdsource certain aspects of what we do as professionals. And we get this feedback loop going where we feel we're on the right track. We feel that we're doing something, quote unquote, on brand, something that is relative to us, something that we feel is not going to cause a disconnect in the minds of folks that we're in front of every day. So when you talk about this idea of building brand, we have to go out and do that. Nobody can do that for us. As a personal brand strategist, sometimes it just involves keeping people on the right track and giving them a little bit of nurture on a daily basis to let them know that they are doing things that are characteristic to them, for which they'd like to be known, and let them know where the time sucks are, or the rabbit holes, or the things that they shouldn't be focused on. We make our own decisions as to how we want to advance our brands.
Well, but none of us can see our own eyebrows or smell our own breath, as you may have heard as an expression. So how do we deal with that? I mean, yes, you can't get in my brain, but you can certainly, I imagine, see things easier that I can, that are the pond I'm swimming in, like the fish seeing it's in the water.
Exactly, and you can only go on the basis of what people are willing to disclose to you. We walk around a lot where we don't get that kind of feedback or that input that we need to maybe course correct. But what we put out in our normal default communication patterns and how we look, the vibe we put out there, that's as much a part of brand as anything else. And sometimes people don't come back and tell us. Or I thought you did this, or I thought you were this, or my first impression